Part two is talking around testing, because sometimes we'll need to assess where an athlete is at this particular point to know what their capabilities are, where they'll need to develop, where they'll need to improve. So there are some tests that we do recommend. I've broken them down based on that previous slide there, but in terms of mobility, a really common one is knee to wall. So ankle mobility, hugely important if an athlete's going to be able to dorsiflex effectively, but also as well if they're able to, for performing a squat, for example. So we've had athletes with really poor range of movement in their ankles that struggle to squat effectively. Shoulder range of movement and thoracic range of movement in terms of both rotation and extension, hugely important for javelin as well. Jumps and landings, so have they got the stability to be able to hop and stick? Can they do a standing long jump for an acceptable distance? Can they do 3 bounds? That's another common test that you might do as well. With foot reactivity, we measure something called RSI, or Reactive Strength Index. The way that we do that is to drop off a box, usually 20 or 30 centimeters, and then the athlete has to spend as little time on the ground as possible and then jump as high as they can. And then we take a measure of those two scores, so ground contact time and height jumped, and then that creates a score. I won't bore you with the details of that at the moment, but what I can say is there are apps that you can now get on your phone that will be able to measure some of these things for you, like how high somebody jumps. So it's really important then to have that foot reactivity. And as I show you the video of athletes using steps in a moment, that will give you an example of how I look to develop that physical capacity. Speed, so sprint tests, hugely important that athletes can run effectively, I think, and be able to run at maximal intensity. I think maximal intensity running is one of the most underrated exercises that perhaps is there, but it's something that I like to make sure my athletes can all sprint effectively. And then also I've put projectile velocity. So let's be honest, not everyone is going to be able to go out there and maybe measure the velocity of a javelin or have the type of biomechanical reports that will tell you the release velocity of a javelin. So instead, you can actually now get some apps that might be able to measure some of these things for you. One thing I was looking into was possibly even a radar gun, which there's one that I've seen on Amazon for about £160. So I'm going to see if it's maybe worth getting that. I've been talking to some baseball coaches in the US about that. So if that does work and that's good, I will let people know that it's worked well and it's something that could be useful, because I'm really keen then to make sure that what I'm able to do is measure the velocity of somebody's throwing ball. It could be a D ball, it could be a medicine ball, and you can of course vary the weights as well with that. In terms of measuring power, something called the test quadrathlon is very popular. I'm guessing most of you have probably heard of this or even done it yourself, but it's where we do an overhead shot. You usually do 3 bounds, a standing long jump, and a 30-meter sprint with a 1-meter rolling start. So that's a really popular power test. Is it the be-all and end-all? Well, maybe not, and I've got a question for you all on that in a moment, actually. And then rest and recovery, I mentioned before around some of my thoughts on that, but you could also have a sleep diary. I noticed literally just a week or 2 ago that my phone has been recording how long I sleep for, which I didn't realize it did, but I've got a Samsung phone and it's got Samsung Health on it. And it was telling me when I was asleep. So it said I'd slept for 7 hours, 50 minutes because I must have not touched my phone. And look, I am one of these awful people that the last thing I do before I go to sleep is put my phone down and put it on charge. And the first thing I do in the morning is check my phone. I wish I wasn't that type of person. Maybe when I stop coaching one day I won't be, but at the moment, I'll be honest with you that I am that type of person. So yeah, the phone knows when I've been asleep and when I haven't. So that might be a good idea. Also wellness scores. So with some athletes, they will actually say how they actually feel that day. What I do recommend with that though is make sure you get up, have a wash, brush your teeth, and at least get a little bit of fresh air and a cup of tea in you before you make that decision. Because if I scored myself every morning as soon as I wake up and wander over to the bathroom, I probably score 0 for wellness. I'm somebody that definitely needs to wash my face and get myself woke up before I can make a decision on how I feel. And then finally, strength. So some examples of strength tests that you might do is something like a 1 rep max or a 3 rep max. Nick did message me to say, please make sure that I say that that's to technical failure, not to complete failure, of course. And to be honest with you, I think strength testing isn't necessarily one of the most important things at the stage of most people on this call at the moment. I'm more interested in body weight strength rather than what you can potentially 1 rep max on a clean. So a question for you, and I'm not expecting you all to put an answer in the chat box necessarily, but I'm just going to give you 60 seconds just to deliberate on this. So should you train athletes for the test, or should improvement in the test be a natural outcome of your training program? And there is no right or wrong answer here, of course. Liam says the second, it should be a natural outcome of your training program. Yeah, so does Carolyn, yeah. And you know what, generally speaking, I tend to agree that it should be a natural outcome. However, I've got one athlete that always gets really frustrated that they're not good at overhead shot. So we do some practice on overhead shot just so they feel a little bit more comfortable when maybe they're in a group environment and they have to test that particular event in a test quadrathlon, because of course nobody likes coming last, do they? Of course, and if they did, then they probably wouldn't normally be involved in athletics, because it's a difficult sport when you're out there on your own.